Welcome to the ABQ Accent, where catalysts, innovators, and risk takers share what their accent is on their work. Like a spoken accent, we all have an inflection or emphasis on where we put our energy. Join us to learn how these folks are putting their accents to work, building their vision of the future, and how you can get involved. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Mariah. This is the ABQ Accent podcast. And today I'm here with my new friend, Peter Rice. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. On this chilly day in the middle of January.
There's no other kind in January, I'm afraid.
True. Yeah, I could do with some snow. So I want to introduce you briefly, and then I'd love to just give you the floor to talk a little bit more about, what your background is and what you love about the work that you're doing these days. And maybe we'll also delve into what you see coming forward in the next year for you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So Peter Rice is a self-proclaimed incurable nerd, which I love. Just own it. He's the editor of the extremely local online news outlet, the Downtown Albuquerque News, also known as DAN, which he created in 2019. Peter grew up in Washington State. Remind me later, I'd love to visit it. You're going to have to tell me where to go. Worked in community radio and later for a consortium of NPR stations. Attended Colorado College, wrote features for Colorado Springs Gazette and the Denver Business Journal. He has experience reporting for newspapers from Oregon to Colorado to New Mexico, including the Albuquerque Tribune, which is some of you might remember, and was an announcer and news writer for KUNM. Love that, also extremely local piece. His additional experience includes work as an electrician, a video producer, and in PR. In addition to your highly experienced professional life, your personal life, it sounds to me, is wide-ranging. You're an avid cyclist. You write guidebooks on cycling in northern New Mexico, which I'd love to learn more about. You wrote several books, which have been published and are available online for purchase. And we'll come into those. And you've also consulted on books. And I think that just says so much about you because your work is prolific and you're doing your best. It seems to me you come from an educator's, get the word out, help people understand things perspective. Does that seem right?
Well, you're very kind. It goes with the incurable nerd thing. Uh-huh. I think there's a lot of those projects you just mentioned were when I was sort of on a full-time basis away from journalism, but somehow couldn't help myself. So, whether it's I'm not sure how altruistic it is at the end of the day, but it is this thing I have to do from time to time. So.
Well, I'd say it really serves a purpose, a lot of it. And what we can see from the Downtown Albuquerque News is that more and more people are getting on board, understanding what this particular platform is about, and they're taking advantage of your knowledge. And I think that's a good thing.
Okay, we'll take it.
Yeah. So let's see. Your website says that you have a coverage area of 30,000 people. That's a population number in this area of downtown. There's a map there, which I printed out for myself because it's an excellent visual of our actual little area of downtown. And it's an interactive map online too. You can click on, zoom in, right? There's contact links.
Yeah, that's sort of a DIY neighborhood border map. But roughly it's the 87102 and 87104 zip codes, pretty much south of I-40, east of the river, and west of I-25, give or take. And no one's quite sure where the coverage zone ends on that little triangle tip at the bottom, but we figure it out somehow. So
it's kind of like the land use zones. Are we looking at city? Are we looking at Bernalillo and county? It kind of just, a lot of people partake. And there's a lot going on there. And you also note that you have over 700 subscribers right now, too.
Indeed.
Cool. In your words, what is the DAN?
I'd say the DAN is an old-fashioned small-town newspaper from the late 1800s or early 1900s, somehow grafted onto the greater downtown area of a major Western city.
In 2025.
In 2025. It's not a revolutionary product. It's just reporting on stuff that people see, that people know about, that people might be curious about and might help inform how they spend their free time or maybe their civic life. It's just we put it out there just like newspapers always have, but it's the extremely local focus is sort of a bit unusual / rebellious in this day and age. So
true.
So that's kind of where that comes in, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it seems like so many news outlets are trying to be everything to everybody, and you just have this really beautiful niche that I think allows your contributors and your readers to, like you just said, learn more about that specific area and why they should be involved and what they want to know about. And there's a quote here. It says, people are happy to pay for very local news about streets they drive on, schools they send their kids to, legislation that would affect their everyday life, and restaurants they might want to check out. What more do we need?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very basic idea right there. It's very tactile. It's very everyday life. But I mean, there's a lot of weird things going on with the business model of modern media outlets these days. But fundamentally, if you're in the advertising business, which most are, at least as much as they are in the news business, if not more so, then your goal is to reach as broad an audience as possible. My goal in some respects is to reach as small an audience as possible, but just big enough that the subscriber base can, pay the mortgage and things like that. So it's a different way to do it, but it's sound in terms of the business side. So.
Well, and if I would encourage people to go to your website to click on the About page, because to me, that is your broadest opinion think page on what newspaper business is doing these days and where it's been and where it could be. And again, you said earlier, it's not a brand new model, what you're doing, but you're refining it to what this area needs.
That's the hope.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So I'm going to give you two quotes quickly that I really appreciated about your readership. One of them, Julie from the downtown neighborhood, says, I've learned so much about this wonderful city because of DAN. And Lanny from West Old Town, Lanny, probably. Dan's think local approach is just what the democracy doctor ordered. I love that. And I also love that you're not trying to bombard us with all things political or all things social media type work. This comes out weekly, right?
On weekdays.
On weekdays. Yeah. During Monday through Friday. And it's, like you said earlier, it's subscriber based. There is a weekly version of it though, correct? I mean, a free version?
Yeah, it's sort of the headlines arranged to be maximally tantalizing, shall we say.
Well, I can tell you that we use them here at the city. I mean, we look at that every single week. So it is being utilized and shared so that our staff members are aware. It's a good tool. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah. Good. What do you love about it? Let's say in the last 6 months, have you had some, well, maybe between you and your contributors, there's 3 other people that you identify in your website as assisting with the DAN. Do you have some top stories or some top experiences that you've had in the publishing experience?
Sure. In the last 6 months? Yeah. I mean, I'd say there's a lot going on as ever with downtown and Old Town. Old Town, we can start with them. They're really kind of coming into a new and seemingly excellent phase.
Agreed.
Of their journey. There's a lot more emphasis on getting locals there. There's a lot of there's some new business owners and new organizations there. Food, yes. So there's a lot of interesting energy in Old Town to cover and write stories about. And in downtown, I mean, downtown is perennially fascinating. I'm sure it has been ever since the railroad came in 1880. And so, yeah, I think we're just kind of covering the latest step in that journey. There's been a lot of coverage of efforts to get the downtown kind of politically and financially organized through a tax increment finance district or a business improvement district. I'd say those are probably the kind of sleeper headline issues that undergird a lot of downtown news. But, from day to day, there's also just fun stuff that pops up or tragic stuff that pops up that keeps everything interesting. So, yeah.
I wonder, as editor, how do you make those decisions? I mean, if so many stories are coming at you all the time, how do you filter things so that you decide what to print or what to publicize?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. It's somewhat.
Science.
No, it's not scientific. It's somewhat instinctual. And it's influenced by a lot of things. One, you want to have a variety in a given week. You don't want things to be too focused on downtown or too focused on Old Town. Yeah. You want some mix of features and hard news. I try to think of it as a kind of balanced meal concept. So if I make you eat the broccoli in the form of a kind of dry story about the machinations of how tax increment financing works, then hopefully also that same week or maybe same day, there'll be a story, as we'll have tomorrow, about someone who just likes to paint rocks in interesting designs and colors and install them in random sidewalks around the downtown area. So yeah, you try to go for a kind of balance of that. But I mean, I live right by the zoo, and I'm a downtown resident too. So in some sense, I am my own prime demographic. So that helps as well.
And so is there a calendar? What are the logistics of putting this together? How do you know, like, far out in advance, what kind of stories you're going to put together that week?
Typically 3 to 4 weeks are planned in some fashion. Usually no more than 3 or 4 days is written at any given time. But there's a long production thing. Now, it could all get upended, and frequently does. But you deal with that when it comes up.
And that's the nature of even as simple as the day-to-day life in a city like this. Some things are going to swoop in and take something else over. And that maybe hopefully those stories can come back later. But I think you're right. I really love that you're taking the opportunity to describe the expanse of what life is like downtown. And then it's not what the other news stories are headlining. It is very much, this is our personality. This is our life. There's nothing creative for the sake of like vanity. It's not like only positive stories or only negative stories. It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be that way to sort of, if only to maintain credibility. I mean, downtown has some serious challenges, and those definitely get into downtown Albuquerque news a lot. But on the other hand, fundamentally, we all wake up in the morning living in a beautiful state in a rich country. Yeah. And so I find it difficult to solely focus on the challenges when we have all this. So that's sort of the philosophical background balance. But yeah, I mean, downtown could be a huge bummer sometimes. So that happens.
That's right. It has a lot to do with perspective and a lot to do with how much you want to get involved. And I think that your pieces and what I said earlier about being educational provide the opportunity for people to want to know more and find the resources to get involved if they wanted to.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, until the entire model got upended 10, 15 years ago, the sort of accidental benefit of local newspapers was to get people to care about their civic life and to care about their community in a more kind of personal / patriotic / whatever else sense. Yeah. And that kind of helped a lot of things along. I mean, it helps the social fabric. It helps make better government, and it helps people decide where they want to eat dinner at a restaurant. Maybe it's a real omnibus package there. But yeah, the hope is just to return to a version of that. Really. Yeah,
I appreciate that. And more than maybe any time, at least in our lifetimes, we need our community now. We need to count our blessings. So that perspective helps a lot. So let's circulate a little bit this story to more about, what is it that you are enjoying about your work and your life these days? I really loved that. Not only did I see that you have several cycling guidebooks for the northern New Mexico, but you have one specific book called Spandex Optional, and it's about long distance touring and bicycling. Yes. I'd love to know how you came to that information.
The Spandex Optional part?
Yes, not just the title, but how did what's the longest distance you've gone, and why did you know you wanted to write guidebooks? And is it just something you have to share?
Yeah, this was sort of in the interregnum between the Tribune and downtown Albuquerque News, when I, was not doing day-to-day journalism, but sort of felt this irrepressible yearning to do something like it. Yeah. So I had a job that was pretty loose about when we took time off, which was very convenient for bicycle touring. So
Yeah.
for a few years there, I would just kind of get a week or get 2 weeks and just hop on my bike and go somewhere. And yeah, so from here, I've biked to LA, I've biked to Idaho, biked around Colorado, to Oklahoma, mostly in the West. Did a couple of runs from my parents' house in Washington. You kind of need, like, on either end, it's really handy to have a base of operations, because you know with all the logistics and bike shipping and things like that. So, but yeah, I did enough of those, and I thought, well, I probably have some good advice here. And yeah, it's out there. I mean, it was pre-smartphone, this book, so
Oh, interesting.
there's some updates that could certainly be made if I ever got around to that. But yeah.
Well, maybe some of your other books have some of the updated stuff. What's your most recent guidebook publishing date?
Oh, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like,
If it was all in between that.
probably
2018?
7 to 10 years. Yeah.
Oh, we need to some updates. We need to. Yeah, that'd be great. Do you?
I wouldn't personally recommend writing books, I'm afraid. It's
Really?
just, it's an insane amount of work. And it's just daily publishing about downtown is way more interesting.
Okay.
I
I'll
can
take that
report.
bucket list
So,
off my list.
you got a
that
novel
item.
cooking or something?
Who knows? Everybody's like, you should write a book. Everybody tells everybody that,
Yeah.
whether or not you're keeping.
I mean, it is something that maybe you just can't ignore one day, and maybe you deeply need to do it. But that doesn't mean it's going to be fun per se. It may be satisfying. It's like, I don't know, raising a kid or something. It's not fun per se, but sort of beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I like that you know what you like and what you don't enjoy. That helps too. Honestly.
It was very hard fought.
Yeah. Let's not fake it that we like all the things that we've put ourselves into. And the publishing piece, did you self-publish just for the sake of, yeah? I probably was one piece off that wasn't as difficult. I'm looking at the other title. There's Curry Made Easy, which is co-authored. And
Yes.
I've got to tell you, I would agree that curry is the holy grail of food. I just want to know why you think that.
So, yeah, so I guess we've all got in our minds the sort of rotating set of dishes that we like to have for dinner on a regular basis.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, it's very easy for me to get stuck in a very small rotation of those things. Now, the trouble is, it's never been easier to get outside of that rotation, right? Thanks to YouTube and Instagram and things like that. But it's also kind of a pain, because you've got to find all these ingredients that you don't normally buy. You've got to take all this time. And yeah, I mean, it's great. You could get Mastering the Art of French Cooking and cook beef bourguignon. And 6 hours later, you will be very happy that you did it.
Real hungry, tired of dishes.
It's amazing. But if you want something fast, really interesting, and most likely very much off your beaten path, then it's all about curry. And not that I particularly know anything about this, but I knew some old family friends from Washington. One of them is from Sri Lanka and an excellent cook, and so she worked her way over here decades ago, married an American, and the American took very good notes as to what she got up to in the kitchen. Nice. So those notes were sort of the basis of this. I mean, it's a little wisp of a recipe book, but it's a fun little introduction to a new type of cooking, and you can probably get all the ingredients that are not normally in your house by going to that store across from the fairgrounds and spending probably less than $40. I would say. I'm not telling it. There's a Indian spice store.
Oh yeah,
Italian might have it too.
But you're right about the Indian place.
Yeah. At last check, they had fresh curry leaves there. So
nice.
That's something to be said for that, of course.
All right. Well, I'll take it into consideration, even though I'm not great in the kitchen.
Cook curry. Yeah. Oh, that's the beauty of it. You don't need to be good.
That's the whole point, right? Yeah.
You take your principal ingredient, you saute it, you add spices, you add coconut milk, and that's pretty much it. It's a very forgiving. This is not like, oh, the bread's rising, and if you put it in the sun, it won't. It'll be ruined or something like that.
Okay,
This
good.
is not a fine pastry.
Well, I will follow up with what happened in the kitchen story. And, part of the reason why I think I was a little bit drawn to that piece was there's this one Thai place here in town that I would eat at all the time. And it was one of my pandemic go-tos, constantly getting takeout from them. So I know their menu pretty well. And I will say I'm partial to Thai curry, more so, for example, than Japanese or even Indian. But I'd love to expand my palate. Thanks, Peter.
Anytime.
And I'll also qualify that maybe the secondary food that is the holy grail of, well, in general, our palates is enchiladas, red
Yes.
chili, green chili.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else about, your external, I would say, world outside of Dan? Are you doing something that you feel is keeping you grounded when so many things are coming at you professionally and you're trying to, I guess, keep your boundaries and understand your energy and what you want to put yourself into on the personal level? What keeps you grounded?
Well,
And what does that mean to you?
That's interesting. I don't know. Maybe this is a sign that I should actually think about this. But I've never really felt ungrounded to a great extent.
Unmoored.
Yeah, I mean it's a very unusual job I have, but it's not insanely difficult. I mean I've had harder jobs
Yeah.
in my day, and so yeah, I wouldn't say I have it too bad here. But one thing I would recommend to anyone who lives in the coverage zone of a small publication they are producing, editing, is to find a friend outside of the coverage zone who's more or less always down to barbecue.
Okay.
And so I've got a friend like that in the North Valley, and if anything ever gets to be too much, I call him up and
Yeah.
we barbecue.
It sounds like that's really a metaphor for so many things that we're
could be.
faced with. Can I just find a friend outside my area that has a good conversational skills and maybe some food? And so much can be taken from those experiences to just, breathe and recenter. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And maybe even again, count those blessings. And I'm glad you have that person. Tell them hello.
I will.
Yeah. What's coming up? Let's see. This is January. We have at least another week before another city council meeting. Are you going to do some follow-ups, for example, on some of those downtown TIFs? Well, the TIF.
The TIF? Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the TIF is currently, it sounds like it's in the process of being batted over from the city to the county. At some point, the state will get involved. So
Yeah.
there'll be some saturation coverage of that
Okay.
whole process.
Yeah. Well, and it's good for people to understand what that means, the long range of the benefits of this particular thing, if it's managed well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common financing mechanism used around the country. Some cities screw it up, some don't.
Yeah.
But those who don't seem to have better downtowns.
Yeah. I'd love to see it come to fruition. I'm excited about that. And I didn't mean to answer for you, but is there anything else coming up maybe in the next week? Why should people be subscribing right now?
Oh, gosh. Well, so what I talked about Old Town, there's a lot of other cool stuff happening in Old Town, and I've got several ideas for stories that need to come out in the next, let's say 2 to 4 months.
Okay.
On that. So we talked about the TIF. The effort to create a business improvement district seems like it might come to some sort of fruition here in the next 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
That is going to be absolutely key to the future revitalization efforts of downtown.
Yep.
This will get super nerdy, but there's a parking study underway.
Yeah.
Some folks at the city will be rolling their eyes right now if they see this. They know I'm sort of obsessed with parking downtown, because it really does seem to be one of those things that kind of unlocks things or shuts them off.
Yeah, I would agree.
In weird ways. But then the housing / neighborhood association influence bill that passed last week, that's going to definitely be the subject of some follow-up reporting, particularly to see, go track down some developers and
Right.
see like, all right, how does this change your life? And where do you see working on this stuff in the greater downtown area?
Yeah.
There's some interesting unanswered questions to follow up there. So yeah, and then we'll do some fun stuff like painting rocks and,
Right.
whatnot.
I would encourage people to go back to last week's article that you did about that after it was passed by City Council. It was a really incredible, legible breakdown for the everyday person to understand what was going on. And so the more that we can get into that, the more, because I think a lot of people are going to be affected by it, not very soon, but I'm very excited about the possibilities of housing that are going to come from it. And again, like you said, some development that might be really needed along with our business development.
Yeah, it could. I mean, that was an earthquake last week. That you do not see city council meetings like that very often. But yeah, I mean, we could have some serious long tail effects of that for good or ill. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time that you put into that and so many of these other things. I wanted to ask you, I mean, we talked a little bit about why this particular version of the news that you're doing is innovative. Maybe I should say taking an old version of what could be news to an online platform. But what do you think is coming down the road for either Dan or the newspaper business that will bring people back to reading daily news that's not just on social media? Or would you encourage people to replicate Dan?
Yeah. I think it's a good business model that deserves to be scaled, hopefully by someone else.
Right.
There is an effort underway to do something in Nob Hill along these lines.
Okay.
But I've always thought that you could take a town like Albuquerque and divide it up into areas where people think of themselves as sort of set off from the rest of the city in some ethereal way.
Right.
The West Side, for example, North Valley, things like that.
Heights, Nob Hill, all that.
Yeah. So I think there's tremendous potential with the model, but I mean, even if we weren't on the cusp of some crazy AI-induced information revolution,
Good point.
Even leaving that huge impactful thing aside, I would still be pretty reluctant to make predictions about where we're at. It's been a very tumultuous 15 to 20 years. We have trained a generation out of the habit of consuming local news. We tend to think of news as emanating, and civic life in general, as emanating from the president on down.
Yeah.
And which I think is, I mean, not completely inaccurate, but we've sort of lost sight of the fact that the extent to which you can get around your town with or without an automobile, the extent to which you can afford to live in your town has way more to do with what politicians at your city hall and your state capital are up to than the president.
Very, very true.
So we've got we've sort of taken our eye off the local ball, and I'm not sure I can't see any obvious, amazing, unstoppable forces that are returning us to something like that.
Okay.
But so many things are in flux right now. It wouldn't surprise me if we could pick a few out and maybe crawl to a better place than we currently are.
Yeah. Well, I think you're setting a great example. I think that your perspective is setting a good example. I think that your work ethic is setting a really good example.
Thank you.
For journalism, for believing in local, for getting to know your neighbors, and for supporting the local businesses, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is to tell a bigger story than downtown. The bigger story is, how are we in our day-to-day relating to our community, and what does community mean, and why do we want to build those relationships and better understand what's happening around us, just like you said, and and see where our decisions and our support of our local politicians can help us improve the quality of life.
It's a big question, but yeah, that is
I need
the
a cup of
general
coffee.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't mean to overwhelm it with that kind of thinking, but it really does. It ripples out.
That is the idea, right? I mean, and this goes way back. I mean, Jefferson was talking about this stuff. It's
Wow.
if you want to be in a well-organized, productive, hopefully affluent society, then you could do a lot worse than having a good information economy. And boy, if we kind of changed that paradigm here in
who's in charge around here?
The last 20 years here. So yeah.
Well, Peter, maybe this does need to be a history podcast. We're going to come back with some of this historical knowledge you have. I appreciate that. That's such a backbone to journalistic writing too, is understanding history and all the pieces that come together to make today happening. Thank you.
Sure thing.
So is there anything you want to leave us with today about Dan or about cycling or about not writing books or?
Well, could we continue on the history theme for just one sec? This is just a sort of random Peter's point of personal privilege, I guess. The history of the United States, the city and the state of New York in particular, between 1900 and about 1950, is absolutely amazing.
Is it? Who knew?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of knew this on some level, but I've been reading a lot of books from that era. You've got Robert Moses building freeways, plowing through neighborhoods all the time. Of course, there was a reaction to that that's still that's actually winning the argument these days. You have Al Smith, the first Catholic presidential nominee and an amazing politician of his own right, the governor, and he got his start with Tammany Hall, which is the sort of epitome of machine politics in this era. And you got Fiorello LaGuardia popping around there in this. And as if that wasn't enough, FDR. So it's just like all that is compressed into New York in
over a span of 50
years.
A
few decades.
Yeah.
And it's that combined with the rise of the railroad and telegraphs. And it's just it's an amazingly tumultuous period in American history that has some interesting parallels to a certain era that we now live in.
Well, yeah, and what you're saying is that it's so informed so many of our lives already across the country, not just New York State.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you have some recommended readings or topics you would tell people to pick up?
Well, sure. The Power Broker by Robert Caro. It is 1,300 pages long. They have it on the Libby app at the library in 3 volumes, which total up to about 65 hours.
Okay.
But it's great.
Yeah.
And then, let's see what else.
Is that a biography, The Power Broker, or is it just about learning to become a power broker?
It's more of a takedown, really.
Okay.
Like Robert Caro is this amazing journalist, and he's one of the last people in America who is basically just take as much time, spend as much money as you want, and just come back with this stuff. He's famous for this 4, hopefully soon to be 5-part biography of Lyndon Johnson. That also kind of blew the lid off that history. But yeah, the Robert Caro did some amazing and some very sinister things, and so Caro kind of dove into it, spent, I don't know, like 8-10 years turning every page in the archives and putting together this indictment of him, basically. But that's also sort of magisterial, right? I mean, it's sort of, on one page he'll talk about some sinister thing he did, and on the next page it's like, well, we have 600 new playgrounds in Manhattan that we didn't have 5 years ago. It's
interesting.
Like, okay, so, yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's the hot tip of the day.
I love it. And I'd be happy to add a couple more tips to the description of the podcast, links, whatever, because you're imparting your knowledge for good reason, and I'm going to take it. Okay. So, and speaking of links, I want people to go to downtownalbuquerquenews.com. That is not ABQ News. That is downtownalbuquerquenews.com. Check out more information about this particular news outlet. Learn about Peter. Learn a little bit about your contributors.
Absolutely.
Look at the map that I was pointing out. Subscribe, please. And we'll learn more on the news outlet, but also we'll have you back sometime soon.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Peter. And we hope everybody else comes back for another ABQ Accent.